Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7, and thank you for joining me, Sam Paton, this evening. And with me, with the wonders of technology, I have the wonderful Peter Curran joining me. Hello Peter, how are you doing this evening?
Hello Sam, I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm going to come back to you once I've done the COVID update, and then we're going to have a good old blather this evening. So first of all, as always, I'm going to do the coronavirus update. As of 2 p.m. today, a total of 2,081,550 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,840,381 have been confirmed as negative. 241,169 have been tested positive. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to put my teeth in this evening. And there are 641 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by tests. Although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, not all those with symptoms will be tested. There have been no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 7,677. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 122 were in hospital last night, 12 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 3,386,321 people have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 2,251,259 have received their second dose. And during the course of today, half of Scotland's adult population have now received their second vaccination. The latest UK daily figures show 127,841 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of one since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. And as always, our thoughts go with family and friends who have lost a loved one lately. Now for the first story of the evening. The EY 2021 Scotland Attractiveness Survey. Foreign direct investment grew in Scotland last year despite falling across the UK and Europe, with Scotland increasing its market share of all new projects coming into the UK from 5.9% in 2019 to 8.4% in 2020. According to a survey by the EY Scotland, it is also the most appealing part of the UK outside of London for foreign direct investment, FDI projects. Edinburgh topped the list of the most attractive FDI city outside London, with Glasgow and Aberdeen also making the top 10. A Scottish Government spokesperson said that these findings continue Scotland's inward investment success story, and despite the challenges presented by the pandemic. Foreign direct investment into Scotland increased by 6% in 2020 compared to a 12% fall across the UK as a whole. Outside London, Scotland is top UK inward investment location for the 6th year running. There you go, Peter. That's a triumph for Scotland. 6 years in a row, the top place for investment for businesses. What do you make of that?
Well, it's very heartening news, and I think some important feature is that this ties in very neatly with what Business for Scotland is doing. I mean, I'm a great believer in the practical approach for Business for Scotland. and they're now coming up with this book. I mean, I've had a copy of the book for some time. I don't know if they're revising it, but really it's about getting that information like that right through into the psyche of all the Scots who need to shift their position on independence. Leaving aside the obvious fact that it's good for the country and good for the people.
Yeah, definitely. And also as well, when you kind of go to, companies are looking to invest and set up businesses in Scotland as well, or within the UK. I mean, needless to say, here in Scotland, we're very welcoming, and we welcome everyone with open arms. So when it comes to business, even the workers and things, I know in terms of the call centres and things like that, there's a big boom in Scotland a few years ago regarding call centres, because they liked the way our work ethics, they like our accent as well. So do you think this is going to keep on growing? And, even though we've got the kind of the difficulties with the pandemic, do you think this will keep on growing here in Scotland?
I'm sure it will, Sam. I mean, exactly how it will grow and in what directions. People making economic forecasts about the behaviour economically and socially of a country and indeed a union in a state of flux, in a world of a state of flux, are risking the fate of Nostradamus. If you make enough predictions, of course, some of them are bound to come true. But I think Scotland is going to become a magnet for investment. People realise that a country about to be, a nation about to be born anew is a fertile place for investment. Now, I think we have to be a little bit careful there with the welcoming with open arms. I mean, I had my old street education in the East End of Glasgow was always welcome people with open arms, but keep a ski and do in your left hand just in case you need it. I think we're going to have to be very cautious with some of them. I mean, at the time of Reconstruction after the Civil War in America, a breed of people appeared on the scene called the carpetbaggers. Because quite simply, they came with these primitive carpet bags and a series of dodgy investment proposals, which range from lunacy to expedient exploitation. So we'll have to be very careful. Yes, there'll be people investing in Scotland, but I don't want us to wind up with even more of Scotland owned by a group of absentee landowners with no cultural or moral or ethical roots in Scotland. So I think we'll have to be careful, but I'm sure it will boom.
Definitely. Now, leading on to the next story, which is a wee bit of caution in regards to the investments in Scotland. Austerity cuts threaten Scotland's recovery. The SNP has said Boris Johnson must reverse damaging UK government austerity cuts and deliver a major fiscal stimulus to secure the recovery, as the US President Biden calls for G7 countries to invest, not withdraw support. Speaking ahead of the G7 summit, the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen urged the UK and other countries to deliver a fiscal stimulus to speed up the recovery, arguing we continue to urge a shift in our thinking from let's not withdraw support too early to what more can we do now. Not just to end the pandemic, but to use fiscal policy to invest in addressing generational issues like climate change and inequality. The SNP has consistently called for a major fiscal stimulus of at least £100 billion, the equivalent of 5% of GDP, to help secure the recovery from COVID and for the Tory government to reverse its austerity cuts, including the cuts to universal credit and the public pay freeze. Commenting, the SNP Shadow Chancellor Alison Thewis MP said that the Tory government is threatening Scotland's recovery by imposing more damaging austerity cuts when it should be delivering a major fiscal stimulus to create jobs and boost the economy. And, this is a warning to Boris Johnson. as Scotland is doing really well and attracting business into Scotland or the UK, for people who believe in the UK. But with the austerity cuts, the universal credits and the public pay freeze, that is actually basically putting all that at threat as well, because a lot of the economy grows from the bottom up, not the up down. What do you make of the warning coming from the G7 summit about investing rather than withdrawing support?
Well, I'm in favour of investing, but can I say, Sam, I have a problem, and it's a complex problem, and I don't for a moment underrate the complexities of addressing it by the Scottish Government. But we are a country, and I say that in the fact of having elected a government for 4 successive terms, who's
Yes.
committed to the independence of Scotland in how
Yes.
we pitch our statements to the UK government. I mean, the press releases emanating from Holyrood, from the Scottish Government, almost always start by saying, the Scottish Government demands that Boris do this, do that. The Scottish Government says that Boris must do this and must do that. There's also a dangerous vein in there of, and if he doesn't do that, we'll be naughty about independence. Well,
Yeah.
we elected you to be bloody naughty about independence. I don't want that to be a bargaining chip on the table. And we came dangerously close to that in the whole period leading up to Brexit and following Brexit. I want the Scottish Government to use all these aspects of the UK government to point out why they are doing the wrong thing for our UK, but they sure as hell the wrong thing for Scotland, and Scotland can do something about it. I'm not saying, I mean, Nicola has a tremendously unenviable job. People think it's some sort of cynic, or it's ludicrous. She's got probably one of the most challenging political jobs that any politician of our generation has had in a country the size of Scotland. She's got to keep the show on the road until independence can be achieved. And on that basis, she has to work with the UK government. That's the only reason we send MPs to Westminster. And it's a question of whether we should, quite frankly. I haven't got a fixed position on that, but I certainly think it's an open question. We could take the Sinn Féin route and say, yes, we'll stand for election to demonstrate our mandate, but we won't take up the seats because we hold out no hope of anything positive from a UK government, least of all a right-wing Tory government drifting inexorably towards, well, close to fascism in some respects, with no regard for truth or democracy. So I really think the SNP has to be honing their tone. They sure as advice from somebody on how to structure their messages. They're doing worthy things, they're criticising the right things, but they're not pitching it right, in my view.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Yeah. The next story. The UK Treasure Island tax havens face a tempest. The UK's exotic network of Treasure Island tax havens could be facing the biggest threat to its existence in half a century after the United States and its allies pledged to squeeze more tax out of large, profitable multinational companies. The often distant islands of the UK's former empire have served as premier jurisdiction for everyone from cash-rich Chinese officials to Russian oligarchs to Western firms to hedge funds seeking lower taxes or complete secrecy. But a tax deal hashed out by the group of 7 finance ministers in a grand 19th century mansion near Buckingham Palace is likely to hit the UK's Treasure Islands hard after a decade of dodging attempts by major economies to claw back revenue. The world loses out on £321 billion a year due to corporate and personal tax evasion, according to Tax Justice Network. Estimates about 184 billion of that is lost to multinationals shifting profits into tax havens, and other £137 billion is lost to wealthy individuals squirreling away assets. Now, Peter, just reading that in the figures is just absolutely astonishing. Especially when you see the small businesses getting hammered by tax and all the time. And now they are basically looking to stop this. Now, when I think of Treasure Islands, I'm sorry, I start my head goes into nonsense modes and start thinking, yeah, what's the story in the book Treasure Island? And yeah, it's just absolutely shocking that this is still going on in this day and age when there's so many people in Scotland and within the UK living in poverty. Do you think they're going to be able to put a stop to this? Or do you think it will carry on regardless of what the United States and other countries may be saying?
It's carried on, Sam, since the first Greek city assembled its citizens in
Yeah,
the public square and said, how are we going to find a mode of government which frees some of our people not to dig the fields and produce the crops and feed us and do the essentials? And what they did, and what throughout the vast sweep of society was done, was they taxed the people who were producing the fundamentals. I mean, the whole of
yeah,
Britain, for hundreds of years, relied solely on taxing agriculture and the farmers and taxing them to the bone. So you will not get morality from a large corporation. The first duty of a corporation is to avoid any laws that will inhibit what it has to do, to pay as little tax as possible, ideally no tax at all, and to outsource all its moral and ethical responsibilities. So we cannot
yeah,
expect that the modern corporation, in the sense of the limited company, or as Americans would call it, the limited corporation, was designed to free entrepreneurs from any legal liability, from doing the right thing, so that they could focus on making money. It was the job of the state to impose the morality on them. That was fine while the state was bigger than any individual company or group of companies.
yeah.
Once you've got corporations which are bigger than many states in themselves, single companies in the world have got a bigger revenue than the GDP of some small, perhaps even medium-sized nations. So don't ever expect morality from a state. The reason this is changing is not because any of the big countries have suddenly have a fit of morality. They've suddenly realized that by presenting this amoral tax avoidance behavior by big corporations, they're damaging the interests of their own country and, crucially, their own electoral prospects, which is the only thing that focuses the mind of democratic politicians. So yes, it should be tackled. Yes, I'm delighted they're tackling it. Little bit wary that the solution might have been worse than the problem, depending on how they do it. And in a small company or an individual entrepreneur, you can get morality. You can find individuals will actually pay tax that they don't want to pay because they believe it's the right thing to do in the wider sense of society. Very few organizations or companies ever attempted to do the right thing except the right thing for their bottom line and their annual shareholder meeting. So if that sounds like cynicism, I don't think it is. I think it's realism. It's certainly skepticism. But I welcome the trend.
Yeah, definitely. And also as well, it also shows that it's always better to support small businesses and small local businesses because
Absolutely.
you're getting a certain level of morality and ethics there that you don't get with the big businesses. And you're helping them to invest into the local community, which in a lot of cases, small businesses really do invest in the small communities and they're part of the local communities. So, if anything, might not change the big businesses, but maybe it might make people more aware of what's going on with the big multinationals.
Well,
Now,
one, I agree and endorse wholly the crucial nature of small businesses in Scotland. And indeed, even in a country like America, small businesses are the heart and the core of the nation.
yeah,
And if you don't address their needs, then you don't address the needs of the nation. Unfortunately, the organisations, particularly in Britain, that have been set up to address the needs of small businesses, actually sometimes take a very narrow view of what their true interest is. That's why I welcome along the line, although it's had its hiccups and its political bumps, Business for Scotland does that. It does it very effectively, and it does it wrapped around a core commitment to the concept of independence. Independence because they know it will be good for business, and they know that small businesses are the heart. Big business, yes, a big business can walk away from your country. And I mean, you only got to look at the threats that emanated from Ineos over Grangemouth at a point in the game, and the battles of Unite with that. Unite didn't actually fight the battle very well. Yeah, somehow we have to make ourselves attractive to business. When I was in the negotiating business, as well as doing negotiating skills for things like industrial relations and commercial contracts, I did a bit of confidential work with big companies, advising them on the political dynamics of dealing
mhm,
with business. And at the time that Tony Blair looked like being re-elected, and there was great tremors running through the Financial Times and the financial community about the horrors awaiting us in a Labour government, they asked me to do a confidential report on it for them, which I did at the highest level of a very large multinational company, which had its original base in Great Britain. But if I can give you the half-crown version of what I said to them, I said,
mhm.
you have nothing to fear from Tony Blair. Tony Blair will be the kind of politician that business will like, and he will be the kind of politician who is bad for the people who elected him. And I still hold to that. And my God, the Iraq War and Gordon Brown and all their incarnations prove me right beyond shadow of a doubt. So that's my position on that, Sam.
Yeah, definitely, and I agree with you totally regarding Tony Blair and all his cronies after him. And I know with them, I used to live in Grangemouth, and the one thing that I found fascinating was my son's primary school had the refinery as its school badge because they were led to believe that the refinery invested and done so much for the community but taking away the fact of the pollution and the health problems that went along with it. So yeah, this is the thing with these big businesses. They try to make the pretense that they're doing a community favours when actually all they're doing is extracting and basically doing more damage than good. Um,
Absolutely. There's been egregious examples of that in America, some of them made into wonderfully, you could call them entertaining if it wasn't for the grim nature of their message, of the
yeah,
way large corporations did that in America. I'm trying to remember the one with Albert Finney playing the lawyer and the lady that was, oh God, famous actress, wonderful actress, and she played the female feisty lawyer who actually got massive justice for these people. While they were doing all these cozy things for the community, they were killing them. It's as simple as that.
yeah. Was it
Erin
Erin
Brockovich,
Brockovich?
it was Erin Brockovich. And she was a
Yeah,
very real woman. You know, I was
yeah,
fascinated by the story and read up on her extensively.
And she does a lot of work now to this day as well.
She does. She's a far. I mean, we forget there are two Americas, and God knows they look as if they're going to come apart at the moment. But America has given me in my lifetime everything that I value most, and it's also done everything that frightens me most. So it's it's a terrifying. Big business has to be very closely watched, and they must not be allowed to outsource their conscience. And governments have to have the nerve to deal with them forcibly, and it can be done. Will Biden do it? Biden might not do it, but Kamala Harris will. I've got huge hopes of Kamala Harris. I think that, I mean, I'm reading well through her autobiography, very recent autobiography, and she's a thoroughly admirable person in every respect. If ever anybody had a conviction and commitment to social justice right at the grassroots level by doing practical things, it's Kamala Harris. So
hopefully. Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, because we need people to be able to stand up to big companies, because they're getting away with literally too much, and they're getting away with murder, as they say. And it's about time they were held accountable for a lot of the stuff that they're doing. Now, to move on to the next story. Brexit row deepens between Frost and the EU over Northern Ireland Protocol. Lord Frost, the UK's Brexit minister, has been attacked by two key EU countries before a key meeting for his criticism of the bloc's inflexible approach to the post-Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland. Simon Coveney, the Ireland's foreign minister, has suggested Frost has been more focused on media messaging in the UK in recent weeks rather than problem solving. France's Minister for the EU Affairs, Clement Bruneau, suggested the UK minister had called into question the Northern Ireland Protocol in the Brexit withdrawal agreement designed to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland. The protocol is not the problem, it is the solution to a problem that we have not created, Bruneau tweeted. The difficult atmosphere comes as the US President Joe Biden is expected to express concerns to Boris Johnson at the G7 summit over the impact of the dispute on peace in Northern Ireland. Now, Peter, I'm going to ask you about your expertise in negotiating on this regarding Lord Frost and his, I was going to say capabilities, but he doesn't seem to have capabilities in kind of sorting this one out. He's probably lacking in those capabilities in actually being able to sort this out with the EU. What do you make of this, what's going on in Northern Ireland with the hard border?
Well, since I'm 3 parts Irish in extraction, I can offer something on this. If I give you an old Irish maxim, if the Irishman asked for directions by a traveller, he said, if you want to get there, I wouldn't start from here. And that's the essence of the Irish problem. Anybody who wants to understand the nature of the protocol and the negotiation, they had better start 100 years ago. The BBC4, the much maligned BBC, is carrying an excellent series, the first 2 episodes of which are available on iPlayer, on the road to partition. And it's, in a sense, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the formation of 2 new states, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, the 6 counties. And that was a pragmatic political solution of the kind that Britain as an empire has always been given to. Deal with the moment and find some kind of fudge. Now, that partition agreement, unfortunately, became a model for monumental 4 asterisk ups across the world. from India and Pakistan to Palestine and Israel. The partition agreement reached then by the parties, and they were all part of it. You know, the independence movement, the IRA, the De Valera faction, the Michael Collins faction, the Craig faction, were all involved in trying to reach an accommodation because people were being murdered and murdered in their homes by both sides. We have to remember that.
Yeah.
I don't want to start stacking up the credit and who were the real baddies in this and well, we were no worse than they were. So the fact is, appalling things happened in the early 1920s right through to the formal establishment of partition. And then everybody drew a sort of long sigh of relaxation, not realizing that they had built a problem which we're still living with, which still reverberates, and it reverberates beyond Great Britain in the problems in Israel and Palestine and the problems in India and Pakistan. It was a monumental fudge. So going back to the negotiation, we negotiated a deal. Neither side were adequately prepared. Both the EU and the Brexiters, the British government Brexiters, totally underrated the scale and nature of the problem facing them. That from the moment Brexit was determined, we were going to create a situation where an EU member state, the Republic of Ireland, suddenly had a border again, and I say a border in the sense of an active border. And active borders can mean many things, but in Northern Ireland, they mean death and violence, and have done throughout history. And it was totally underrated. Frost, as the chief negotiator, I've no idea how prepared any of these people were for negotiation. I spent the latter part of my commercial career from 1988 through to 2004 operating as an individual negotiating skills trainer, mainly operating through large companies, but also operating through Strathclyde Business School for a period in the 90s. And can I say, the fact that big companies negotiated every day and governments negotiated every day led them into the delusion that they understood the process. Very few of them do. And the other group who understand it even less than them are the media. Now, negotiations, especially government and public negotiations, operate one in smoke-filled rooms in confidence, but they also operate in a public theatre. They operate where both sides are making statements, and these statements impinge on the negotiation. Because among negotiators, your real problem doesn't lie with the people across the table from you, the people you're negotiating with. It's the people standing behind you, the ones that are poking you in the back, saying you can't do that, you mustn't do that. What the Brexit negotiators had standing behind them, if I may be as kind as I can about Brexiters, is an uninformed, underinformed, not very bright group of people with totally unrealistic expectancies. The good negotiators can resist that, and they can induce a sense of realism in the people that are backing them, of whom they're the agent, if you like, the principal, and manage to get the other side to understand the nature of that problem. I watched the Brexit negotiations closely, and they were bound to fail. The EU rapidly realised that they'd underrated the game, and the Irish always understood the game. I mean, Simon Coveney is a man of high intellect and high interpersonal skills. He's not a man who would needlessly create a rammy in an empty house, as they would say in Glasgow. Whereas the Brexit side was full of mouthy, I look for a technical term, bloody idiots, which is what a lot of them were, the businessmen. And so I don't know how they're going to unscramble this. It's a god-awful mess. And that line in the Irish Sea is going to be a huge fissure. It would be laughable if it wasn't tragic. One of Boris's ideas for dealing with it is to drive a tunnel under the Irish Sea to Northern Ireland through one of the largest munitions dumps of the First and Second World Wars. If ever there was a BAMPOT idea, if ever he qualified for BAMPOT of not just the year, but the decade and the century, that idea would symbolise all that's wrong. I wish, thank God, I'm not going to be dropped in among these negotiations. What I would do, try and get them to some understanding of the nature, structure, and language of negotiation. Negotiation is a series of techniques for reaching agreement. It's not the only technique, and it's done against the background of if we break down, we're going to use other techniques, and you sure as hell ain't going to like them. In other words, and national negotiations are about that. Once upon a time, Britain was admired for its diplomats. God knows why, but it was. Nobody admires diplomats anymore. The breed is undetectable as far as I can see.
Yeah, and I think going back on what you said about Boris Johnson, I think idiotic BAMPOT probably describes him very well, and probably some of the diplomatics as well. And and that is my own personal opinion, and not the opinion of Broadcasting Scotland. I just thought I better clarify that there. But yes, definitely.
I'm sorry, Sam. I can make as many personal opinions as I like, but you must be rigorously, not impartial, I hope, but objective.
Yes, I've got to. I've got to behave and watch what I say. But yes, I do agree with the kind of BAMPOT thing. Yeah, and that's my personal opinion.
I'm sorry to let you down a wee bit.
Personally, I think they're doing a great job. Really, they're really you get the drift. Right, moving on to the next story. Before I get really into trouble off of Linda here in the background. The Speaker rejects foreign aid amendment. An attempt by the rebel Conservative MPs to reverse foreign aid cuts has been thwarted after the House of Commons Speaker ruled their amendment was out of scope, but urged the government to bring a vote on the issue. Andrew Mitchell, the former International Development Secretary, who led the rebel push, said he had received clear advice from the clerks that the amendment would be acceptable. However, the Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, said that he had deemed that the amendment was not in scope of the bill. Saying he had received advice from senior clerks, he said that the government should bring the matter separately to the House to test the will of the MPs. Earlier, the SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford MP, had challenged the UK government to heed the warnings and reverse their grotesquely inhumane decision to slash the UK's aid budget in the middle of a pandemic. Now, Peter, this has been all over the news since the stories broke about the Speaker not allowing the amendment. What do you make of all this, what's been happening regarding the Speaker? He seems quite a weak Speaker of the House. And that's my opinion, not the opinion of Broadcasting Scotland. But he seems to be quite weak. What do you make of the Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle?
Well, it's fascinating that he has the surname of the man that once was the world authority on gambling and card games, and who was referred to Hoyle by Americans. In fact, Phil Harris wrote a song about gambling, and he said, "We'll play this game according to Hoyle." He set the definitive rules for poker, roulette, you name it. Lindsay Hoyle, as I presume it's pronounced, had an unenviable task facing him. He was facing John Bercow, who was the exact reverse of a timid speaker. John Bercow was very active, very some would argue opinionated. I never saw him like that. And yet somehow for a long period of time managed to retain the confidence of the entire House, and that was the only way it could be done. But he was very interventionist. He was not reluctant to state where he stood. And I think there came a point when the centre couldn't hold, if you say, and he had to move. Watching, is it Lindsay or Lindy Hoyle? Lindsay Hoyle. Watching him
Lindsay, I
before
think it is, yeah.
as deputy speaker, I wondered about his fitness for it. But at the end of the day, I felt he struck a reasonable balance. He doesn't, in the main, antagonise the House, but he does understand the procedures, and he's got his Erskine May Bible embedded in him. And I think in this he's been pretty brave. And if the MPs don't like it, well, bugger them. I mean, they're the one that dragged him to the speaker's seat and made him speaker. And he's trying to do the best job he can. Logically, I should dislike him. In practice, I don't. As for the issue is another thing entirely. I mean,
Yes.
the issue of foreign aid is always present. There are always those who are totally insular and say we should not send a penny to anybody outside of this country. Let them run their own bloody democracies or banana republics or whatever they have. Let them stew in their own bloody juice. We've got to look after our own first. And unfortunately, in that, they appeal to the worst aspects of the ordinary citizen, including me in my bad moments. I've got all the fallibilities of the voter and say, I'll look after my own first. The reality is you are looking after your own first if you recognise the vital need for international aid. It was a great Englishman, a great English poet, a great English clergyman, John Donne, said, "No man is an island unto himself alone." Well, forgive him the masculine pronoun. He was using it to mean no human being is an island unto himself alone. And that's not only proved by history, social movements, etc. It actually goes in line with particle physics. We're all actually part of one great particle soup in the universe. We're all together in this, and they've shown that a single particle in the universe can affect the behavior of one millions of light years away. So everything that happens in the world happens to us. We're threatened at the moment by instability in the Middle East. We're threatened by instability in America. We're threatened by the pandemic. We cannot allow ourselves to become totally insular. But there is a balance to be found. Otherwise, the government would never survive 2 days if they egregiously pumped money away to some foreign government without any clear idea of how it would be used or, crucially, who would use it, and deprive their own. And the vaccine argument epitomizes this. But we've got to get it right. We must get it right. So Anne asked me to come down for a simple statement. I'm behind foreign aid. I approve of it. I think it's vital. I think it's necessary. I think the Speaker did the right thing insofar as the situation permitted him to.
Thank you very much, Peter. And now we're moving on to the next story, quite a sad wee story, in fact. The body found in Norway of a 15-month-old boy who died crossing the channel. A body that was found on a Norwegian shore several months ago has been identified of a 15-month-old child named Arton, who died alongside his relatives as they tried to cross the channel to start a new life in the UK last October, local police have said. The body was found near Karmøy, the southwest Norway, on New Year's Day, more than 2 months after the vessel carrying the Iranian Kurds, Rashul, Aran Nazad, Shiva Mohammed Panama, and their 3 children sank. Rescuers found Nazad had drowned, while his wife and 2 of his children died shortly after being pulled from the water. Arton's body was not immediately found, and he was listed as missing. Norwegian police said that the skilled professionals in the Department of Forensic Sciences at Oslo University Hospital had managed to retrieve matching DNA profiles. Arton's remaining family have reportedly been notified, and his remains are to be flown back to Iran to be buried. This is quite sad, Peter. These people were trying to cross the channel to get a better life, and then tragedy was struck. Um, it's what's your feelings on this? I just find it quite heartbreaking.
Well, it comes a point in your life, your children grow up, and then even your grandchild grows up, in my case, and then suddenly you see the process all over again with great grandchildren.
Yeah,
So I got very recent memories of what a 15-month-old child is like, and the thought of that appalls me. What appalls me equally is what must have been the drivers and the desperation that allowed a parent or parents, or maybe a mother, to take that appalling risk to deal with unscrupulous gangsters, maybe depending on how they decided to do it or what misjudgments, and what would have met them on the other shore if they'd got here. The problem of immigration isn't easy. If we think we've got a problem with it, that kind of desperation immigration, think of Italy. Think of the Greek islands, what they've been coping with and doing their best. I mean, people have been dying regularly in the Mediterranean, men, women, and children, despite the Italian governments in the port who are being overwhelmed immediately in their infrastructure, in their own towns and villages. We're still trying to rescue these people. The moral and ethical decisions that have to be made there they're on a gargantuan scale. I mean, there can be no easy answer. What is not the answer is our own criminally inhumane Home Office. I say our own for lack of a better description of being under the UK. The Home Office has been notorious for its hostile environments, its callous inhumanity to immigrants and to dealing with them when we came here. So all we can do is exercise our part of humanity. And when Scotland, I say hopefully, when Scotland is independent, we will have immigration laws. Well, we will have, and we'll have borders. We can't duck these things. And it's very complex for us because we're on an island. At the moment, we're governed the whole of that island by Kate. We are, as we often were referred to in the early days, very early days of independence, as the postern gate to the UK. We were the back door into the UK in a sense. So some very hard policy thinking should be being done now. I can't escape, and I pray that I'm wrong, the feeling that SNP is not doing enough of this policy thinking. And when it outsources it, trots out its latest stable of Nobel Prize winners, they may well be outsourcing it to the wrong bloody people. But somebody needs to think about these things. We face two great global emergencies, climate change and the nuclear threat. We're now facing the virus of global emergency, which no country in the world was adequately prepared for. And they should have been. Yeah. We've known since the 1918 flu that another pandemic was coming at us and we'd had to deal with it. It's been long overdue, and there were the people derided as Jonas who were constantly reminding of us, sooner or later it will happen. Just as sooner or later climate change will destroy us if we don't think, if it gets there before we're blown apart by a nuclear bomb. We've got to become rooted in the present, act for the present, but also act for the future. It's the throne of statesmen and stateswomen that they're capable of that, and we must have them. For the child, I'm appalled. For his parents, I'm appalled. What can I say?
I know, that's heartbreaking, it really is. Thank you, Peter. Now for moving over to Germany. For the next story, the far-right Alternative for Germany, the AfD, today tried to put a brave face on election losses in an eastern stronghold where its anti-immigration line failed to chime with the voters. After polling neck and neck with Chancellor Merkel's Conservative CDU in Saxony-Anhalt for weeks, the AfD on the day won just 20.8% more than 16 points behind the CDU and 3.5 points down from the previous elections in 2016. Under surveillance in Saxony-Anhalt for suspected anti-democratic activity, the AfD is shunned as a potential coalition partner by all other national parties, but it could still play a significant part in September's federal election if it took a large share of Conservative votes as it did in 2017. The results suggest that the AfD are now out of touch with voters and highlighted a rejection of the party's hardline right-wing policy platform in Saxony-Anhalt. That platform included a €2,000 payment for each baby born to at least one German parent, cuts in public funding for theatres promoting anti-German plays, and a statement that Islam is not compatible with Western culture. Now, Peter, I'm quite pleased to see that they are being put in their box, so to speak, and it's quite good. So quickly, what's your feelings on them being not getting very far?
Well, I'm delighted. And in fact, it was one of my first tweets this morning. It's the rise of the resurgence of the far right in Europe and across the world, for that matter, has always been worrying. It's been very worrying for the health and integrity of the EU. And I'm delighted that that has happened. The only thing I would say is, if I may name drop here, I want to quote Jesus Christ, who said when he was criticised for allowing Mary Magdalene to wash his feet with, or clean his feet with a very expensive ointment, saying the money used for that and given to the poor. He said, the poor are always with us. I will not always be with you. And like the poor, the far right will always be with us. I mean, as a species, we have evolved in a certain way. And there are certain behaviours which manifest themselves very often as political behaviours. And there's a mindset, I think it's a wrong turning of evolution, about people who don't understand or have not evolved sufficiently to realise how you can operate in a fair, equitable and just society. And they're the far right. I mean, there are other villains on the far left who make an equal claim to BAM pottery. The old saying was, if you took the extremes in one of the parliaments, the extremes are actually sitting closer to each other in a loop, and the BAM pot of the left tomorrow can be the BAM pot of the right. And I think we've seen it happen in Scotland without putting any names to it. So I'm delighted with it. I mean, Merkel has her critics, but on overwhelming balance, I'm a Merkel fan. And she's out of the game now, and good luck to her.
Yeah, because that's her now. Is she retired now, isn't? Is she retired? Oh, she's still the Chancellor, is she not? Aye, right. She's stepping down, yeah. I thought she'd already retired, sorry. My apologies. Okay, now for the final story of the evening, supporting people to get online. Around 23,000 people will be given new online skills and training to help improve their chances of securing a job or to reduce isolation. The £26 million Connecting Scotland programme, which helps those on lower incomes and groups like the elderly, will offer online training skills as well as providing people with devices like iPads and Chromebooks and unlimited data for 2 years. This builds upon previous funding aimed at helping more people to access the internet, including those who were at high risk from COVID-19, care home residents, disadvantaged families with children and young people leaving care. This latest funding also provides an existing group of 36,000 recipients with another year of unlimited data. The organisations can apply for Phase 3 funding until the 5th of July. Now, Peter, I think this is absolutely amazing. When I first heard about this, I was absolutely delighted because I remember going back a wee while ago, going back probably about 15, 16 years ago, there was a scheme in a housing estate in Scotland and West Dunbartonshire, who basically where they gave every resident free computer and internet for a year. And I was one of those residents, and it was absolutely amazing because it created a whole new world for people. And there was a lot of people who actually created businesses from doing that as well. So what do you make of this, Peter? I mean, I'm full of enthusiasm for it because I was part of something like this 15 years ago, and I was so sad to see that it wasn't rolled out across Scotland. So what's your feeling on this one?
I welcome it. I mean, there's an element in me, Sam, that says we should actually be endeavouring to mount a massive programme to wean people off the internet, because I think there are of internet addiction. I have to say, quite honestly, if I could reinvent fate and go back, I would uninvent television and the internet, and I could have did my life to literature and music instead of frittering it away and cursing at my computer. But I think it's unavoidable. It's the world we live in, and we must
Yes,
have,
it is.
and it's a prime source of information. I got my first BBC B computer, I think, in late 1981. And I opened the box, eagerly plugged it, and waited for it to do wonders. And I was greeted by a grey screen with a white prompt on it. I thought, what the hell do I do now? I had to go and buy a magazine.
I remember the first computers.
And get it to pat a tennis ball over a line drawing of a mat and say, for fuck's sake, what have I spent a few £100 on this? But I realised then I would never be bored again. What I didn't realise was I would also be terrified most of the time by what I saw on the internet. I think it's good, it's right. I mean, my great-grandchildren at the age of 6 and 4 and a bit actually are more au fait with their tablets than I am. I'm not sure I'm entirely happy about it, but I sure as hell marvel at it every time I see it. And it's the world that they will live in. So yes, it's a good idea.
And the thing is, as well with the young...
Sam, I've got a key question before we end, which is more important than all the other. What does SAM stand for?
Oh, so, well, my proper name is Samantha.
I hope that was the case, because there's a great song. Great song called Samantha.
The only person in the world that calls me Samantha is my father. Everybody else calls me Sam. Yeah. Yes, but yes,
the only
and yes, the only
person
person in the world is my.
The only person in the world that called me Pete was my mother-in-law, and I never liked being called Pete. Summoned up one of these one-legged cowboys who've got drunk outside a saloon. I always preferred the Peter. But anyway, I would always Pete my mother-in-law. I love dearly.
I won't call you Pete. You're absolutely fine. I'll always call you Peter. But no, my father
was the only one
calls me Samantha. Yeah, and if I phone him and I say, "Hi, Dad, it's Sam," he actually hangs the phone up on me, and I've got to dial back and then say, "Hi, Dad, it's Samantha."
Well, my granddaughter's called Charlotte Emily. She's now Charlie.
Oh, that's nice though. That is nice.
Yeah,
that's nice. And also your granddaughter, who's 6, it's her birthday today, isn't it?
No, my granddaughter is 31. It's my
Oh, the
great-granddaughter.
great-granddaughter. She's 6 today.
Yeah.
So
She
do you want
phoned
to
me
say
up.
happy
My
birthday to her?
granddaughter phoned me up 6 years ago. Said, "You're going to be a great granddad." And I was offended. I said, "I thought I was a bloody good granddad already." And then the penny dropped.
I bet you're a fabulous grandfather and great-grandfather. Fabulous.
Some would not agree.
Right, I better say cheerio. It's been an amazing show. Thank you, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure. And tell your great granddaughter happy birthday from us here at Broadcasting Scotland. And I hope she
I
had a brilliant day.
will indeed. Thank you,
Thank
Samantha.
you. No, I might. No, I'm not. I'm not going to call you. I'll just carry on calling you Peter. I'll be nice. I'll behave. I will behave. And to all the viewers, thank you so much for watching Scotland at 7 this evening and joining me here. And if you wish to get involved and you wish to subscribe, and you can do that, and because we are looking to employ people, we seriously are looking to employ people because we've got some great people who deserve to be employed. So please, 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 if you can afford to, please subscribe. The details are on the screen. If you can't afford to subscribe, then that's absolutely fine. Don't panic. You can basically be our media team and spread the word and share our shows. And all our information is there. And if you want to sign up and be a volunteer, again, information's there on the screen. Please do. But thank you very much for joining me and Peter this evening. And we will see you tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock as normal. Thank you very much. Good night.